First of all, what are your thoughts on the current situation? What is the way forward for this nation?
Well, I think that, I think the voices have really spoken for themselves, and that we need criminal justice reform, and we need to look at how we end some of the disparities that COVID-19 has shown, apparently that's in Black and brown communities. It's something that the Congressional Black Caucus, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus has been talking about for years, and have put budgets forward so that we can end those disparities and get something that would be equitable as far as the justice system is concerned. I can tell you something that I've been dealing with all of my life.
There will now be a curfew in New York City tonight, starting at 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. There's been some pushback about how New York police officers have responded. What's your message to law enforcement and to the protesters?
But number one, as I said, I think that to those, overwhelmingly, those individuals that have protested have been nonviolent and peaceful and demonstrations. And I think those are very effective. In fact, if I've been myself arrested at times for peaceful demonstrations, but not where you are, throwing Molotov cocktails or putting things on fire or anything of that nature. That then takes away from the message. But the message needs to be loud and clear that the kind of killing that took place of George Floyd at the hands of four Minneapolis police officers has to stop. We've seen our share of that in New York. And so that's what the message has to be. Now, what took place in my district yesterday, there was a demonstration in the middle of my protest in the middle of my district yesterday. And as the protesters came toward the precinct, many, well, just about all, led by the commanding officer of the precinct and others, they simply took a Kaepernick knee in recognition of what the issues were that the protesters was coming about. And as a result of that, as opposed to a confrontation and no acknowledgement of what took place and the wrong that has taken place with Mr. Floyd's case and a number of others, when you go to Aubrey and Georgia and other cases, the protesters appreciated the cheers broke out because they want recognition. And I think that recognition needs to also come from the police department. You do not, sit silently when you know that there was a wrong that was committed by someone who happened to wear a law enforcement uniform like you. That's one of the first steps. The blue wall of silence, and although or hiding and behind the so-called brotherhood of police, when you see and know that someone has done something wrong, that silence can't continue. If you are good. I mean, Dr. King said, in the end, we won't remember the bad language or the bad acts of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. And so we need police officers to also stand up.
You mentioned Dr. King there. I mean, it's a stark reminder that so many issues, so many things haven't changed, certainly when it comes to racism and racial injustice in this country. One thing that has changed is technology, and you're seeing so much information, video, images, commentary being shared across social media, which is, in many ways the proof, the hope for justice, but also at times the gasoline, especially if some of these images or moments are shared without context. What's been your impression of how the information about what happened initially about these protests has spread across social media?
But I just hope that what the key is, you need to focus on what caused the protest in the beginning. That's where it is. Now, surely there have been some individuals who I don't think are there or interested in protesting at all. Some are there to try to take advantage of a situation. Thus, you found, for example, we saw in Minnesota what took place. Some 85% of the individuals that were arrested were not from Minnesota. You go to Atlanta, Georgia, you saw that the major number of those individuals were not from Atlanta, Georgia. In fact, you saw those that were from Atlanta, Georgia, coming out the next day, understanding the need for having peaceful protests, but cleaning up their city. This is their city, and they're not there to destroy it. But the focus still, what some people would like to do, like the President of the United States, is to move the focus off of what was the root cause of what the problems are, where the majority of people are protesting and saying enough is enough. And I think that's where the focus must continue and remain.
Meantime, you've got Twitter putting a warning on President Trump's tweet suggesting that looters be shot. On the other hand, you have Facebook leaving up the president's post. Mark Zuckerberg saying that Facebook shouldn't be the arbiter of truth. You've got employees at Facebook walking out virtually today because they're not happy with Facebook's decision. Who's right? Which company is right in terms of how they've handled the president's remarks? Twitter or Facebook?
I can tell you who's wrong, the president of the United States. They should not be put in a position. I personally think that Twitter is absolutely correct because the president's statements are cited are there to ignite, not to soothe, not to bring together. He's trying to ignite. I want us to come together, work together. We need the police departments and the police officers working with people in the protest. We need to change where those inequities are, the disparities are in communities of color that we've seen. The type of language that the president is using is the type of a language that that accelerates a fight and violence, not puts it out. So clearly the person that's in the wrong is the president of the United States.
That said, should Facebook then be taking more responsibility for what the president is saying on their platform? Should they be taking stronger actions, or, as some people say, is that censorship?
It's not censorship if, in fact, you go into a theater and you shot fire, fire, fire. You know, those are not what you call constitutional rights to free speech. That's exciting and causing the possibility of other individuals getting injured. That's what the president is doing. And so, you know, I don't think that it's a violation of free speech. Now, if you want to talk about it, then you should talk and if you're going to allow those words to stand, you should also say something explicit about what those statements are, and that the statements are not, you know, many of his statements are not accurate. And so don't leave it out there so that individuals think that what he's saying is accurate, number one, because many people just look at social media and think that what is there is the truth. But folks and what this president has been doing for the last 3 years is using social media and Twitter to get around the press that is accurately depicting his actions. So he is doing that deliberately to get around those individuals who know what true journalism is and going and trying to utilize it in stories that most people would not ordinarily pay attention to because the regular media would not even be reporting it, or if they did report it, they would report the facts and the truth therein of what those remarks said and what they mean.
Meantime, the president has signed this executive order trying to curb the power of social media, and now that Twitter has taken the stand, you know they're going to have some more tough calls heading towards the election. What do you think Vice President Biden's should be doing here in terms of picking a VP? Do you have an opinion on what kind of person or who can join his ticket and put up a fight?
Look, obviously, I would love to see an African-American woman, but clearly the president has some great candidates to choose from. And so I reserve that right to the president, as all other candidates, to the vice president, as all other candidates have had the opportunity to choose a running mate that they feel is compatible with them and can best deliver their message. I am absolutely enthused, though, with Mr. Biden's decision to say that once he becomes president, his first selection to the Supreme Court will be an African-American woman. And that is key and essential, especially dealing with the issues that we're talking about today, criminal justice and others. I remind people often that even before the 63 and 64 and 65, the 64 and 65 Voting Rights and Civil Rights Bill, and even it was the Supreme Court that started making decisions in the 50s to change and to end what was Jim Crow rules and regulations. It is the Supreme Court appointees in the federal court that will outlast any president. So if we are talking about, so, and it was the Supreme Court that put in the Jim Crow rules over 100 years before that. So there was almost exactly an 85-year-old swing from when the Supreme Court put in and made Jim Crow legal until where it was finally overruled by the Supreme Court. And I want folks to be reminded that that's really is what is at stake at this election. So I am absolutely enthused with his decision to make sure that the next appointee, when he becomes president of the United States, will be an African-American woman.
Congressman, we have about 30 seconds left. You have the mayor of Atlanta urging protesters to go home because the city's already sustained so much damage. What is your quick message to Americans tonight?
Let's come together. You know, we've seen with our own eyes what took place in Minnesota when clearly Mr. George Floyd was murdered. When you look at the chokehold that was put on him, and the other 3 officers were co-conspirators. Okay. But we need to come together as a nation. This is the greatest nation this planet has ever seen if we come together and not and believe with our own eyes.